Welcome to the Literacy Council of Frederick County Tutor Training Pre-Workshop. This course is designed for individuals who have attended the volunteer information session and have been accepted as a tutor in training. If you have not yet completed part 1 of this course, you may wish to do so at this time. Otherwise, let's begin.
In this course, you will be presented with information on these learning objectives. If you have prior experience in working with adults, you will probably already be familiar with much of this content. If this material is new to you and you have questions about some of the information, you will have many opportunities in the full tutor training workshop to discuss your concerns with the trainers. Take a few minutes to carefully review these learning objectives so that you understand the key topics that will be covered in this course. There are 5 adult learning principles that we will discuss in the upcoming slides. Read these principles and ask yourself if you agree or disagree with the concepts. Can you think of any other differences between working with children compared to working with adults? Adults like to see a connection between what they are learning and what they need or want to do in the real world. They want to make progress towards specific and often immediate goals. This is especially true for ESL students, who often have a very real and immediate need to learn English. Some of those needs might be talking to a child's teacher or reading a note from the teacher about the child's progress and needs, interacting with doctors or other parts of the healthcare system, getting services at a business such as ordering at a restaurant or getting help at a grocery store. Learning that advances goals and improves life is even more meaningful when adults discover something about themselves or a situation that they hadn't recognized before. In other words, learning sticks when adults learn something both relevant and new. Tutors should strive to address students' everyday needs in each lesson. As they become more familiar with published instructional materials, participants will notice that lesson topics center on common life experiences and needs. Tutors should use these published lessons as a starting point, but they may have to adjust the specific vocabulary or dialogues to match students' particular circumstances.
When you learn to play a sport or musical instrument, you practice what you learned. As soon as possible, you applied your new skills to real tasks. It is the doing that makes the improved skill and that makes it permanent. Flashcards, memorization practice, worksheets, and other types of drill activities all have their place in building literacy skills. But in the end, adult students will not be confident until they have used their new skills to accomplish real tasks. As a tutor, you can suggest ways that the skills they learn in class can be applied to help students meet their goals. Adults learn best when they feel valued, when their opinions are appreciated, and when they feel listened to. They want and deserve to have some say in the classroom and in the direction of their learning. One of the best ways to show respect is to find out what students expect in the relationship and then try to meet those expectations. Another part of respect is making sure that adults feel safe in the learning situation and that they know it is okay to make mistakes. Share with students the mistakes that you make as well, so they realize that everyone does slip up. You learned about surface and deep culture in part 1 of this pre-workshop. Cultural appropriation is when a member of a dominant culture adopts the culture of another culture in a way that might give offense. For example, you might think it is a sign of respect to dress the same as students and have everyone call each other by their first name, a sign that we're all in this learning experience together as equals. Some students may appreciate this. However, You may have students that interpret this behavior as not respecting them enough to take your teaching responsibilities seriously. In an ESL classroom, you also need to be aware of the students' cultural norms. Things that you might do naturally in the classroom, like hand someone a piece of paper with your left hand, give them a thumbs up, or beckon for them to come to the front of the class with one finger pointing, can be perceived as quite offensive by different cultures.
Each adult learner brings a lifetime of experience, problem solving, negotiation, and accomplishment to the learning situation. Learning is much easier when you make use of these skills and connect the learner's experience to what is being taught. A student's skills and experience can become valuable learning resources for other students and for you. Use students' experience to provide context for learning and practice. In group situations, you can provide time for students to learn from each other. Tutors can also provide opportunities for students to take on teaching or other leadership roles in the classroom. Adults may have many barriers to learning. Your job as tutor is to accept, guide, and support the student. Changing work schedules or overtime can make it hard for students to get to class consistently. Family responsibilities, like taking care of children or parents, can interfere with the amount of time a student has to study outside of the classroom. Even everyday issues like reliable transportation can interfere with learning. Some barriers may be psychological or emotional, such as low self-esteem, fear of failing, or concern about what others think of them. These barriers can impact how willing a student is to speak up in class or practice English with native speakers in the community. Successful tutors also recognize the support they are capable of giving. The Literacy Council of Frederick County can provide your student with resources available in the wider community to help them deal with these type of learning barriers. Think back to your prior learning experiences to see if you recognize any of these principles. Like the students you will be working with, you too have a wealth of knowledge and experience to bring to the tutoring process. The important thing is to recognize this and learn which experiences to draw from.
You have already learned that teaching adults is not the same as teaching children. However, both children and adults are affected by conditions that educators describe as learning differences, difficulties, and disabilities. There is a lot of research on the impact of these conditions on the learning process. But for our purposes here, it is important only to broadly understand the terms and become familiar with a few coping strategies. The ellipses in this diagram represents the primary ways people approach learning. Discovering the conditions under which students learn can help you present new information to that student in ways that make it easier for them to understand. The following slides will talk about each of these learning factors. You may already be aware of theories regarding learning differences, sometimes called multiple intelligences or individual learning styles. Everyone has a preferred way to take in new information. The majority of students are categorized as either visual learners, meaning they learn best by seeing, or as auditory learners, meaning they learn best by hearing. Students may also be kinesthetic or tactile learners. Those are the people that learn best by touching and doing. In reality, most people use a combination of learning styles, and the style they prefer may change depending upon the topic. People also prefer different types of environments when learning. Some people may perform best in the morning, while others are most productive in the afternoon or evening. Other people prefer long learning sessions where they work until they are finished, while some prefer shorter sessions with multiple breaks. Students may prefer to learn in the comfort of home, while others may prefer a desk at the library, away from the distractions of home. Even temperature, noise, time of day, and ambient lighting can influence the ability to focus and learn new material. As a tutor, you will not be able to control for all of these factors, But talk to your student about how they learned in the past and how they prefer to learn English. Then you can try to accommodate their needs as much as possible. The learning process is easier when you engage in multiple learning styles, also known as a multisensory approach. This method increases the likelihood that you will connect with learners, even if you don't yet know how they learn best. It makes it more likely that students will remember and apply new information and skills, and accommodates the fact that the way a student learns best may vary from activity to activity. In basic literacy and ESL instruction, tutors work with students to develop their listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. They use a lot of instructional activities that require role play and other interactions. These are all examples of using a multisensory approach. The center ellipse represents the group of adults that faces some condition or combination of conditions that makes it hard to learn. The difficulty may be physical, like poor eyesight or hearing, or it may be educational. A student may have gaps in important background knowledge or experience. Personal circumstances may disrupt learning, or cultural issues such as language limitations may interfere with learning. Once the issues are addressed, these students are generally able to overcome their learning difficulties. The center ellipse represents the group of adults that faces some condition or combination of conditions that makes it hard to learn. The difficulty may be physical, like poor eyesight or hearing, or it may be educational. A student may have gaps in important background knowledge or experience. Personal circumstances may disrupt learning, or cultural issues such as language limitations may interfere with learning. Once the issues are addressed, these students are generally able to overcome their learning difficulties.
For a few people, the way the brain stores and retrieves information interferes with learning. Dyslexia is an example of a learning disability. And unlike a learning difficulty, a learning disabled student may have found ways to compensate, but the disability is always there. Students who come to the Literacy Council of Frederick County seeking services and who present with possible severe learning disabilities are referred to agencies who have the professional staff and technical skills to address the disability directly. A tutor may, however, discover that a student shows some signs of a moderate or slight learning disorder. If you believe that a student you have been matched with needs special help, you should address this with your coordinator. Take some time to review this list. Having any of these signs does not constitute a diagnosis, of course, but they may indicate that a student you're working with is struggling with a learning disability. These are indicators to pay attention to and to discuss with the staff member. The methods listed on this slide are often successful in working with a student with a learning disability, such as dyslexia, if it is not severe. They are also good teaching practices to use with all students. Students who deal with learning disabilities benefit greatly from being given more time to complete tasks, to think of answers to a question, or to become familiar with a text before being asked to read it. Students who deal with learning disabilities also benefit from repeated practice of a task. As they read a passage over and over again, decoding the words will become easier. Repetition doesn't mean just doing the same thing over and over again. It also means practicing the same skill in multiple ways. Remember, the discovery and direct instruction method suggests presenting new information in small chunks. If a task is small, students can realistically imagine successfully completing it, even if it was difficult. This builds success. Before you ask a student to do something, model it for the student. Read a passage to a student, then read with the student before asking the student to read it alone. Modeling and repeated exposure reduce anxiety and increase the likelihood of success. Encourage students as they struggle to learn. Point out their successes and work with them to identify strategies to deal with their learning disabilities. Lastly, provide structure in the form of consistent lesson plans, clear directions, and concrete expectations. These steps will help your students focus on learning. You'll receive more information on planning and goal setting in the full tutor training workshop. Use this slide to review the concepts presented in this module. Write down any questions or comments that you may want to share in the full tutor training workshop.
Congratulations on completing the tutor training pre-workshop for the Literacy Council of Frederick County. Thank you for your time and attention. Before you committed to becoming a literacy tutor, you likely reflected on whether you yourself have the necessary characteristics to become a good tutor. Now that you completed these modules, you have a better idea of the extent of that task. The goal of this reflective activity is to create a written list of the characteristics of a good tutor. You will bring this list to the full tutor training workshop, and at that time you may decide to share your list with the trainers and other tutors. To start, think back on the topics covered in the two modules to create your list. Consider individually the characteristics you think would make a good basic literacy or ESL tutor. It is helpful to organize the characteristics in terms of three broad categories: knowledge, experience, and attitude. If you are not sure how to begin, you may click forward to the next slide for some examples you may or may not want to include on your own list. There are many more characteristics that can be added to each of these categories. Have fun and be creative. Again, thank you for your participation and desire to join our organization.